if I tell you, don't worry, why are you laughing? I didn't say anything funny yet. The second I say, don't worry, me or someone else, what do? Good. Okay, I know you're awake. You all had coffee. This is wonderful. So the second we say, don't worry, these are the questions that start coming into mind. Why is he asking me that? Wait. Does he have something bad to tell me? Because when he says, don't worry, it means that there's something he has to say. Don't worry, I don't have anything to say like that. It's just homily this week. We're good, okay? So if you feel that way when we say that to one another, do you all notice Jesus said something to us in the gospel a couple minutes ago? Did you hear it? Yeah? This side heard it. This side I don't think heard anything. Y'all were asleep. Did you all hear what Jesus said in the gospel a few seconds ago? Deacon proclaimed it beautifully. What did he say? Fear no one. Instantly we should all start getting worried. Why? Because Jesus is saying not to fear anybody. Why is Jesus telling us not to fear? Should we be afraid of something? Who should we be afraid of? What should we look like? Should we do this? Should we do that? And we start doing the dance in our mind. Fear drives us to make up ideas. Fear drives us to make up stories in our heads that we can't do anything, that we're not worth anything, that we can't speak to people, that we can't be in certain situations because society says I can't. When did society become God? And why are we listening to them anyway? When Jesus says fear no one, he means it. He means don't fear, because fear is not from God. We put that on ourselves. And that's why this weekend's gospel is so important. Because here's the second part of this concept of fear. There are people in our lives who are afraid of things. There are people in our lives who are afraid of advancement. There are people in our lives who are afraid of interacting with certain people or dealing with certain situations, and they become paralyzed by that fear. So much so that that fear forces them to project it onto you because they can't be afraid alone. And they drag you into their sense of fear because misery loves company, doesn't it? Is that the way we're called to live? Jesus says, fear no one. By letting go of fear, we are actually more free to live. By letting go of fear, we are more free to be his sons and daughters. Do we ever think of that? By giving in to what God has given us, we become free. By sitting in our own fear, we become shackled. And we drag ourselves and others into a false sense of hope. We actually become, if you remember the parable of the talents, that sound familiar? Where the master gave 3 sets of talents out, right? 1, 2, and 5, remember that? And the guy with 5 said, I did really well. I went and I multiplied it and you got 5 more. Sound familiar? And then the guy who had 2 said, yes, I went and did 2 and I got 2 more, yeah? And what happened to the one who had 1? Oh, master, I was afraid with what you were going to do, so I buried it under the ground. When we live in fear, we are the third man. And what did the master say to that gentleman? Wicked servant. Wicked servant, not because he was a horrible human being, but because he chose to live in a fear that was not his own. But he made it his own because he chose to stay in that. The master, who is Jesus, tells us we don't have to be that way. Life wasn't meant to live that way. Life was meant to live in the freedom of sons and daughters of God. And that's the good news of this weekend's gospel. So there are 3 fears that Christ comes to dispel in this gospel. First, the fear of our secret self. Everybody's embarrassed about something they did in their life. All of us. Nobody is sitting here saying, I have a completely open book. And from my birth to now, you could know everything I did. The Lord will love me. The people will love me. You're living in a false sense of fear, okay? All of us have embarrassments. All of us have little dark secrets we don't want anybody to know. Jesus says, don't be afraid of that because God already knows and God has given you grace for forgiveness. So that's the first one. The second is this notion of fear of pain, fear of death. Some of us say, well, I'm not afraid today. Salute. God bless you. There are many others that are. There are many others that are afraid of pain, mental, emotional, physical, psychological. They don't want to endure it because they're just afraid. They don't even know what the pain is, but they're afraid of it. Christ comes to cut through that and say, you no longer need to live that way anymore. Live in me and be free. That's 2. The third is a fear of self-worth. Isn't it interesting that the world constantly tries to dupe us into believing that we're not worth anything? That everybody around us is constantly trying to one-up the other? Isn't that something? Notice that? Yeah? Yes? Don't fade on me yet. I'm almost there. The world constantly tries to tell us we're not worth anything because we don't have this, because we haven't achieved this level, or we haven't attained this concept of financial wealth. We haven't attained this circle of friends. We don't look like another person. We don't have a degree like another person. We don't act like another person. Our family members put us down constantly because they have a degree and you don't. And they make you feel worthless when they do. Christ is here to tell you in this gospel this morning, you are not worthless. Stop being afraid of self-worth, for Christ knows what you are worth. Christ knows every aspect of your heart, and he loves you in every single fiber of that. Amen? And he wants you to understand that more clearly today, and to really reach into yourself and say, I am worth it because God made me so. Because God baptized me in that water and Holy Spirit to be that way and to continue to walk in his grace. That's worth. That's why every talent that we are cannot be buried by fear. It has to be multiplied by grace. And that's why Jesus says everything we say will come forth, because it is he who puts it in us and is he who calls us to have a deeper understanding of it. When we acknowledge God in prayer and we step forward in faith, fear turns to an incredible power. Fear turns into the compassion you didn't know you could have for someone who's in fear. Fear turns into the concept of forgiveness and humility. And it is a healing that the world, who constantly tries to dupe everybody that they're better than everyone else, the healing that Christ gives is the world needs today. That's the healing we need. All of us have the possibility and the power and impetus to be instruments of change. Amen? So let's do it. Let's do it. When Christ says, don't worry, when Jesus says to us in the gospel so blatantly and plainly, fear no one, he's right.